Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into, well, really the foundation of cybersecurity management, asset security.
Mm.
This domain, CISSP Domain-2, is absolutely fundamental. I mean, it's roughly 10% of the questions on the certification exam.
Right.
And yet, it seems deceptively difficult to actually do well, doesn't it? Especially in big, complex organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. That difficulty scales like crazy. When we talk asset security, we're not just talking firewalls and AV anymore.
No.
It's everything the organization values. Everything. So our mission today, it's a targeted deep dive. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe.
A shortcut. I like that.
To really get the why and the how of this domain, we need to trace that whole information lifecycle from the very start, classifying data.
All the way to the end, getting rid of it properly.
Sure.
No destruction.
Exactly, that necessary final step.
And the goal here really is to give you, the listener, a solid footing so you can actually design security controls that make sense for the business risk. Because that's the core concept for this whole domain, right? Protection must be commensurate with the asset's value. Always.
That's the mantra. If you overprotect, you're wasting money, maybe even breaking the business processes.
And if you underprotect, well, that's obvious. Unacceptable risk.
Precisely. Value has to drive every security decision. Security isn't just like a default setting you turn on.
No, it's an investment, a conscious one.
Based on what that asset is actually worth. If you don't know what you have or where it is or its value, you're basically just guessing where to put your security dollars. Flying blind.
All right, so let's start at the very beginning then. Section 1, identifying value. Classification and accountability. The who and the what.
Okay.
Sounds almost too simple, but first step, identification. Before you classify it, you got to know it exists and what it is.
It's crucial. You need that accurate inventory. What is it? Where does it live? Who depends on it?
And practically, how do we do that? Tag.
Yeah, tagging is a big part of it. Comes in different flavors, right? You've got your physical tags, simple stickers, barcodes on hardware. Pretty standard stuff.
Right. Seen those everywhere.
Then electronic IDs, think RFID tags, maybe active ones, maybe passive. Good for tracking equipment moving around a building, for example.
All right.
And then logical identifiers, things like software license keys or unique IDs baked into a system config file, something that identifies it uniquely in the digital world.
And the whole point of all that tracking, all that tagging, it feeds into the really critical first step, asset classification.
Yes. This is where you formally assign that level of protection needed, and it's based purely on its business value.
Okay, and this is where you mentioned earlier that management versus technical split really comes into play.
Immediately. Classification is fundamentally not a technical decision. It shouldn't be.
Why not? IT knows the systems.
They know the systems, sure, but it's a business and management call. It's driven by risk tolerance, legal obligations, competitive advantage.
Things the business owner understands best.
Exactly. The asset owners. They're the only ones who really grasp the asset's true value. What's the impact if it leaks? What are the potential fines? Reputational damage.
So security provides the menu of options, maybe.
That's a great way to think about it. Security says, here are the controls for level 1, level 2, level 3 protection. But the owner looks at the value and says, okay, based on the risk, this needs level 2. They define the policy that results from the classification.
But what if the security team, has the budget for controls? Why shouldn't they just play it safe, classify everything as top secret, just crank it up to 11?
Yeah, common temptation maybe, but the risk there is double-edged, practicality and usability.
How so?
Well, imagine security mandates top secret level encryption and access controls for, say, routine internal emails.
That does sound painful.
The business would just grind to a halt, people can't get their work done, the overhead costs shoot through the roof.
And users will find workarounds anyway.
Exactly. They'll bypass the controls just to meet their deadlines or performance goals. Classification has to align with the actual mission need. If the mission owner says it's internal use only, well, that's the level of protection required. Commensurate.
That makes sense. And this distinction, business side versus technical side, it leads us straight into accountability, which, as you said, gets really interesting.
This is where CISSP really emphasizes that separation of duties. Management oversight, technical implementation, governance, distinct roles.
And understanding these roles is key, especially that idea that accountability always stays with the data owner, even if they delegate the day-to-day stuff.
That's the cornerstone. You cannot delegate accountability. Responsibilities, yes. Accountability, no.
Okay, so let's start at the top. Management side. We hear data owner and data controller. Are they the same thing?
Often used interchangeably, yeah, especially in exam prep material. Think senior management. This role holds the ultimate legal rights. They are accountable for protecting the data.
So they define the high-level policy, determine what happens to the data.
That's it. They're the responsible party. Now, there's a slight nuance in regulations, like GDPR might use controller more specifically for defining why and how personal data is processed.
And IPA might talk about the owner as the covered entity.
Right. But in both cases, this entity, this role, signs off on risk acceptance. They define controls based on legal duties. They carry the liability. It doesn't transfer.
Okay, so if the owner delegates the work, the actual hands-on protection, that moves to the technical side, the data custodian.
Yeah.
Or data processor.
Exactly. The custodian is the implementer. If the owner says, encrypt this data, the custodian is the one choosing the algorithm, managing the keys, setting up the storage, doing the backups.
Day-to-day technical management, implementing the controls.
Following the owner's policies. And keeping that separation is vital. You don't want the person defining the policy, the owner, to also be the only one implementing and auditing the controls.
Right, that's a classic conflict of interest. Opens the door for problems. Okay, owner defines policy. Custodian implements. Where does the data steward fit in? Sometimes this one feels a bit fuzzy.
Yeah, it can seem redundant if the owner is accountable, right? But the steward's value isn't purely technical or legal. It's about governance and, importantly, quality.
Quality, how so?
Think of the steward as the bridge between the technical storage custodian and the business rules owner. They focus on data integrity, making sure metadata makes sense, ensuring compliance with internal standards.
So it's like making sure the data is actually usable for the business.
Exactly, fit for purpose. If a sales record needs to go into the quarterly report, the steward makes sure it meets the required format, accuracy rules, quality checks before it gets used for decision-making. They keep the data clean and compliant from a business utility perspective.
Okay, that clarifies it. Steward.clean, compliant data. Custodian.safe data storage and handling.
Oh.
Owner takes the heat if it leaks.
That's a good summary.
And finally, the data subject. That's just us as the person the data is about.
Correct. The individual human being identified by that personal data.
So the core principle, just to hammer it home, you can outsource the custodianship.
Yeah.
Right. Give your data to a cloud provider, they become the processor.
Yep, very common.
But you can never outsource the accountability.
Yeah.
That stays with the owner.
Legally, ethically, contractually, it has to be defined in service agreements, but the buck stops with the owner. Always.
Okay, moving on to classification schemes. The actual labels we use. These dictate the controls, right?
They absolutely do. The chosen label determines the mandatory handling requirements. We generally see two big families.
Government first.
Yeah, the classic government schemes. Unclassified, confidential, secret, top secret. Often very structured, rigid handling rules backed by law.
And the commercial world has its own flavors.
Right. More variety here. Public, internal use only, confidential, highly confidential, proprietary, private, trade secret. You see lots of variations.
The specific names don't matter as much
as the handling requirements tied to them. The controls must spell out exactly how data at that level is stored, accessed, transmitted, and, crucially, destroyed.
What's the challenge there? Just picking one.
The challenge often comes when you need to map your internal, maybe proprietary commercial scheme onto a mandatory external framework, like NIST standards or ISO 27001.
So your company's proprietary might need to align with a high impact level in a government standard.
Exactly. You need clear procedures for that translation. And just as important is the administrative side. You need rules for declassifying data.
When does that happen?
Say a financial report is confidential before earnings are announced but becomes public afterwards, or maybe after a set retention period.
You need to review these things.
Periodically, absolutely. Both the classification level and the ownership. At least annually. Think about it. The business value of a sales forecast plummets after the quarter ends. Keeping it classified highly confidential forever wastes resources and increases liability. That regular review is critical.
Got it. Okay, so once it's classified, the asset enters its life cycle. That takes us to Section 2, the data journey. Life cycle, states, and destruction. The when and where.
Right. Managing assets through their entire lifespan.
And there are distinct phases.
Yep. A pretty standard information or IT asset life cycle. Starts with identify the requirement, then develop the business case, then create or acquire the asset.
Then the long part.
The operate and maintain phase, or O&M, where it's actually doing its job. And finally, Replace or dispose. Retirement.
And security needs to be baked into all of those.
Every single phase. It starts right at the beginning with secure provisioning, getting the asset set up correctly from day one.
And that looks different depending on the asset.
Totally depends. Think about infrastructure as a service ISS. Provisioning a new server instance, that's usually a highly controlled process, right? Managed by a small IT group, lots of change control.
Yeah, lockdown security has a lot of direct control.
Exactly. Now contrast that with software as a service SaaS, provisioning a new user account for, say, Salesforce.
Often self-service or done by department admins. Much broader group.
Right. Security here relies much more on predefined policies. Policies set by the owner, enforced by the custodian, often using the SaaS platform's own policy tools. Your technical control is more constrained. It's about enforcing policy within that SaaS environment.
Okay. And then at the other end of the life cycle, decommissioning.
The opposite of provisioning. It's the whole set of activities to permanently remove that asset from the operational world.
So removing it from inventory lists.
Revoking licenses, securely migrating any data that needs to be kept.
And then the actual destruction based on the retention policy.
Precisely. Closing the loop.
Now, you mentioned something that ties all these phases together, cryptography.
Yes. Encryption is, well, uniquely useful. It's an effective control across all phases of that data lifecycle.
Yeah.
When it's being used, when it's archived, and even helping with secure disposal. It's probably the single most consistent tool we have in the box.
That's a great point. And it leads perfectly into discussing data states. Because the security needs change dramatically depending on where the data is physically sitting.
Absolutely. Yeah. 3 main states to consider, each with its own threats and solutions.
Okay, first up, data at rest.
This is most of your corporate data, sitting there on secondary storage. Hard drives, SSDs, tapes in database tables.
And the threat isn't just hackers coming over the network.
No. A huge threat here is simple physical theft or loss.
Ah, right, like losing a laptop or backup tapes.
Exactly. There was that massive breach cited in the source material back in 2009. An employee left backup tapes in their car.
Oh, no.
Containing health information for nearly 5 million patients. The tapes were stolen. That data was probably secure against network attacks sitting on the tape, but totally exposed physically.
So the solution for data at rest, especially removable media or laptops.
Mandatory encryption of the storage itself. Whole disk encryption. Transparent database encryption, encrypting those backup tapes before they leave the secure facility. Protect it even if the physical asset walks away.
Okay, state number 2, data in motion or in transit.
Data moving across a network, internal network, the internet, doesn't matter.
Protection here is about the channel.
Exactly, securing the transmission path itself. We rely heavily on cryptographic protocols, TLS for web traffic, IPsec, VPNs for secure tunnels.
The threat is eavesdropping, someone listening in. Or changing the data midstream.
Right. Interception, modification during transit. Not the data sitting passively, but being actively transferred.
Okay, and the third state, data in use. This sounds like the tricky one.
It's arguably the most challenging, yeah. This is data currently residing in volatile memory. We're talking RAM, CPU registers, processor caches. It's being actively worked on.
So disk encryption doesn't help here.
Nope, it's outside that boundary. And it's vulnerable to memory exploits. Think about the Heartbleed bug back in 2014. That was famous.
I remember that. It affected OpenSSL, right?
It did. Attackers could send a routine heartbeat request, but due to a coding flaw, the server would send back not just the heartbeat, but extra chunks of its live memory.
Supposing whatever happened to be there.
Sensitive data belonging to other users, passwords, session cookies, even the private encryption keys used to protect data in motion.
Wow. So a flaw in processing the data exposes the keys protecting the data transmission.
Exactly. Shows how vulnerable data is when it's actively being processed, even if it's encrypted at rest and in transit.
Which leads us to, well, something that sounds futuristic. Homomorphic encryption. What's the goal there?
It's kind of the holy grail for protecting data in use. Imagine you could perform calculations like adding 2 numbers directly on encrypted data without ever decrypting it first.
How would that even work?
Think of the analogy of a locked glove box. You put ingredients inside, lock it. You ask someone outside to perform actions through the gloves, mix ingredient A and B. They do the work, but they never see the raw ingredients.
Okay.
Homomorphic encryption aims to do that mathematically, perform operations on ciphertext. The result is still encrypted ciphertext, and only the owner with the key can decrypt the final correct result.
So you could send your encrypted financial data to a cloud service for analysis. They run the analysis on the encrypted data and send the encrypted result back.
That's the dream. They never see your actual numbers. It's incredibly complex and computationally expensive right now, way too slow for most general-purpose applications.
But it shows where we need to go, protecting data even while it's being crunched.
Exactly, the ultimate goal for data-in-use security.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but still related to the lifecycle. Liability. We need to talk about the critical balance of data retention.
Formalized in policy. What data do you keep, where, how, and most importantly, for how long?
It's a double-edged sword, you said.
Absolutely. Regulations demand you keep certain things, tax records, HR files, whatever. But keeping data too long is a massive liability.
What are the risks? Just storage costs?
Storage costs, yes, and they can be huge. But also dramatically increased exposure if you do get breached. More data for attackers to steal.
And legal discovery. E-discovery.
That's a huge one. Imagine getting a legal order demanding all emails related to Project X from the last 10 years. If you've kept everything, sorting through petabytes of ancient, maybe poorly indexed data, the cost can be crippling. It can literally sink litigation efforts.
And the trap, the sources warn, is taking the longest legal requirement you find, say, 7 years for finance records.
And just applying that 7-year rule to everything, emails, chat logs, draft documents.
Regardless of type or value.
That leads to massive data hoarding. A good retention policy has to balance legal needs with the declining business value of the info. If data isn't likely needed for e-discovery and its business value is gone, get rid of it promptly when the policy says so. Don't default to keeping junk.
Which brings us neatly to the end of the journey. Data destruction and remnants. When data hits its end of life, defined by that retention policy, you have to destroy it. Properly, irrevocably.
And you have to deal with data remnants. That's the faint ghost of the data left behind on media even after you try to delete or erase it. Magnetic traces, electrical charges, optical patterns.
Residual data. Our goal is to make sure that can't be recovered.
Exactly. And the right technique depends heavily on the media type.
Okay, what are the main methods? Physical destruction.
That's the most absolute. Shredding, pulverizing, incinerating, melting it down with chemicals. Works for everything. Paper, CDs, DVDs, hard drives, SSDs, tapes.
Most certain method,
Yeah.
but obviously the media is gone. No reuse.
Right. Permanent and can be costly, especially for large volumes.
What about degaussing? Sounds powerful.
It is. It's specifically for magnetic media only. Old-style spinning hard drives, HDDs, and magnetic tapes. It blasts them with a super powerful magnetic field.
What does that do?
It scrambles the magnetic particles on the platter or tape that represent the ones and neos. Randomizes their orientation, effectively destroying the stored data.
But only for magnetic media.
Critical point. Degaussing does absolutely nothing to SSDs, flash drives, USB sticks, CDs, DVDs. They don't store data magnetically. So many organizations get this wrong in their disposal policies. You can't degauss an SSD and call it secure.
Okay, good warning. What's the third option? Overwriting.
This is software-based. You use a program to write new data over all the old data on the drive, usually patterns of ones and zeros or random data multiple times.
Wiping the drive, this allows for reuse.
Often, yes. That's why it's common for media being repurposed internally or maybe resold. But the standards vary how many passes are needed. 3, 7. DoD standards used to specify more.
And is it always effective?
For most purposes, yes, if done correctly with enough passes. But for highly sensitive data, some organizations might still require physical destruction or at least verification after wiping to ensure remnants is truly gone before that drive leaves their control. Verification is key for destruction.
Okay, that covers the life cycle. Now let's get practical in Section 3. Applying controls. The tools for protection and management. The how.
Right, the actual tools we deploy.
Let's start with a big one. Data loss prevention, DLP. Sounds like exactly what we need.
It aims to be, yes. Its purpose is detecting and preventing unauthorized data disclosure, stopping sensitive data from leaving when it shouldn't.
But you said it's not just tech.
Absolutely critical insight from the sources. DLP is not a box you buy and plug in. It fails if you treat it that way. It must be a holistic program. People, process, policy than technology.
Meaning?
Meaning if you haven't clearly defined your data classification standards first and trained your people on the policies about handling sensitive data, the DLP tool will just drown you in false positives or miss real incidents. It needs that context.
Okay. Assuming you have the program aspect.
Yeah.
How does the tech work? Two main types.
Generally, yeah. First, network DLP, NDLP.
Where does that sit?
At network choke points. Think your internet gateway, maybe email servers. It scans traffic flowing through emails, web uploads, file transfers, looking for patterns that match sensitive data definitions.
Like a credit card number pattern or keywords from a confidential project.
Exactly. If it sees classified data going where it shouldn't, it can block it or alert someone.
What's the weakness?
It can be bypassed. Malicious insiders, or even just careless users, can use methods that don't go through that monitored choke point. Saving to a USB drive, using a personal mobile hotspot, printing. NDLP don't see that.
Okay, so the other type tries to address that. Endpoint DLP.
BDLP.
Right. EDLP puts an agent directly onto the endpoint device, the laptop, the desktop, sometimes even mobile devices.
So it sees everything happening locally.
Much deeper visibility. It can monitor file access on the machine, copying data, printing, screen captures, connecting USB drives, much more granular control.
Sounds powerful. Downsides.
Cost and complexity are way higher. Managing agents on thousands of devices is a big job. Performance impact can be a concern. And there's still a risk.
What's that?
A sophisticated attacker who gains admin rights on the endpoint, or even a privileged insider, might be able to find and disable that EDLP agent.
Blinding the system locally without triggering a network alarm.
Potentially, yes. So neither is perfect on its own. Often a combination is needed. Okay. Now, data isn't just internal anymore. It's flying off to the cloud. That brings us to cloud access security brokers, CISSPs.
CISSPs are pretty much essential now for hybrid environments. When your users start accessing cloud services directly, Office 365, Salesforce, AWS, your traditional network perimeter controls become less effective.
Because the traffic might not go through your gateway.
Right, or even if it does, you need visibility into what's happening within that cloud service. CISSPs bridge that gap. They enforce your security policies on cloud usage.
How do they do that? Two main ways, proxies and APIs.
Correct. The proxy approach puts the CISSP directly in the data path between your user and the cloud service.
Like imagine the middle, but for security.
Kind of, yeah. It allows the CISSP to inspect traffic in real time. It can see if someone's trying to upload a file marked confidential to their personal Dropbox and block it, or enforce specific login requirements before letting the connection proceed.
Okay, and the API approach?
That's less intrusive, usually. The CISSP integrates directly with the cloud provider's own management APIs. Think Microsoft Graph API, Salesforce API.
So it's not in the real-time data path?
Not usually. It's better for looking at what's already in the cloud scanning files in OneDrive for compliance issues, checking security configurations, auditing user permissions, more for monitoring and compliance checks after the fact rather than real-time blocking. Often organizations use both modes.
Makes sense. Now, what about controlling data that we intentionally send outside? Like sharing a proprietary design document with a partner. That's where digital rights management, DRM, comes in.
Exactly. DRM applies controls to data, usually copyrighted or sensitive information, after it's been distributed. It tries to maintain control even when the file is on someone else's system.
How? Usually encryption.
Often leverages standard crypto, yes. The document might be encrypted and only decryptable if the user's system can verify they have a valid license or permission. It might restrict actions to block printing, disable copy-paste, set an expiration date.
Maintaining confidentiality and integrity beyond your own walls.
That's the goal.
Okay, now for something a bit sneakier. Steganography. Hiding things in plain sight.
Pretty much. Steganography isn't about scrambling the message like encryption. It's about hiding the existence of the message altogether.
How?
By embedding the secret message inside another seemingly harmless file, like hiding text within the pixels of an image file or inside an audio file's data. To the casual observer, it just looks like a normal picture or song.
So it relies on nobody suspecting there's something hidden. Security through obscurity.
Entirely.
Right.
And that makes it an attack vector, hiding malicious code inside an image downloaded from the web. Or, for insiders, exfiltrating sensitive data by hiding it in innocuous-looking files that DLP might not flag.
Clever, but dangerous.
Very. Detection is hard because you don't know what you're looking for.
Okay, let's shift to configuration and inventory again, but specifically for software. Tracking software licenses and installations sounds like a nightmare.
It is notoriously difficult. Software is easy to copy, install anywhere. Virtual machines, cloud instances, personal devices. Keeping an accurate inventory is tough.
And the risk isn't just about paying fines for unlicensed use, right?
That's a compliance risk, sure, but the security risk is often bigger. If you lose track of where software is installed, you lose track of patching.
Creating shadow IT, old vulnerable versions lying around.
Exactly. Unpatched web servers, old Java versions. These become persistent vulnerabilities that attackers love to find. It's not just a fine, it's an open door for a breach because you lost track of an asset.
So what are the best practices to manage this? It sounds like a multi-pronged approach.
It has to be. First, application whitelisting. Instead of trying to block known bad software, blacklisting, you only allow explicitly approved software to run. Everything else is blocked by default.
Proactive control. Much harder for malware or unauthorized tools to execute.
Right. Then, use gold masters. Standardized, pre-hardened, secure images for operating systems and key applications. You know, every deployment starts from a known good, secure baseline.
Makes consistency easier.
Definitely. And enforce the principle of least privilege. Standard users shouldn't have the rights to install whatever software they feel like. Restrict installation privileges.
Prevent the problem from starting.
And finally, leverage technology like Unified Endpoint Management (UEM) software. These tools help automate inventory, push patches, enforce configurations, and even remotely wipe devices across your whole fleet, desktops, laptops, mobile from one place.
Bringing order to the chaos. Now, applying big standards like ISO 27001 or NIST frameworks can be overwhelming. Organizations use scoping and tailoring to make it manageable.
Yes, it's a necessary dose of pragmatism. You don't just swallow the entire standard whole if parts don't apply.
So scoping is cutting parts out.
Trimming away entire sections or controls that are genuinely irrelevant to your organization. If the standard has a big section on securing industrial control systems, ICS, but you're a bank with no ICS, you scope that whole section out, it doesn't apply.
Makes sense. And tailoring.
Tailoring is more nuanced. It's modifying specific, relevant control requirements to better fit your unique environment or technology while still meeting the original security objective.
Example.
Maybe the standard mandates daily backups to take media X, but your organization uses a highly resilient, certified, cloud-based backup solution that meets or exceeds the recovery objectives. You'd tailor that control to reference your specific solution, documenting why it still meets the underlying security goal.
So customizing within the lines while scoping cuts out entire irrelevant sections.
Good way to put it.
Okay, finally, let's not forget the physical side. Data lives on devices, on paper. Physical and mobile security.
Crucial. Physical security protects the laptops, servers, printers, filing cabinets, the things that hold the data. And mobile security is a huge headache these days.
Especially with BYOD. Bring your own device.
Oh, yeah. BYOD introduces immense complexity. You've got corporate data sitting on an employee's personal phone or tablet. How do you secure your data while respecting their privacy on their hardware? It's a tightrope walk.
What makes securing a personal phone so much harder than a company-issued laptop?
Fragmentation is a nightmare. Dozens of Android versions, different iOS versions, countless hardware models. It's way harder to standardize and manage than a fleet of identical corporate laptops.
Patching must be a mess.
Totally fragmented. Plus, users often have more admin-like privileges on their own phones. The solutions have to involve rigorous inventorying, knowing what BYOD devices access corporate data, using MDM or UEM to enforce configurations like passcodes and encryption, strong authentication.
And keeping company data separate.
Absolutely. Using containerization, keeping work apps and data in a secure encrypted bubble on the phone that the company can remotely wipe if the device is lost or the employee leaves without touching their personal photos, apps, or data. That separation is key for BYOD.
Okay. And for really high-value physical assets or sensitive documents, we use safes and vaults. It's not just about a simple lock, is it?
No, the controls get quite specialized. Beyond the basics, changing combinations regularly, maybe video surveillance good safes have features designed to resist attack.
Like passive relocking. What's that?
It's designed to counter physical manipulation, like someone trying to drill the main lock mechanism, if the safe detects that kind of tampering.
Yeah.
Extra internal bolts, hardened ones, automatically fall into place independent of the main lock, so even if the attacker defeats the primary lock, these extra bolts keep the door secured. A secondary defense.
Clever. And thermal relocking. Sounds like it deals with heat.
Exactly. Designed to defeat attacks using torches or maybe excessive heat from drilling. If the internal temperature of the safe door hits a certain high threshold,
Indicating an attack.
another internal locking mechanism engages automatically. Again, an independent way to keep it secure under attack. It shows that physical security involves just as much clever engineering as network security.
Absolutely. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground there.
We really have.
Let's try to wrap this up. We've basically mapped out the whole anatomy of asset security today. Started with defining ownership, classification, emphasizing that key idea, protection aligns with value.
Owner, custodian, steward roles. Then we track data through its 3 states: at rest, in motion, in use, and how the security needs fundamentally change for each.
Right. Disk encryption for rest, TLS VPNs for motion, and the challenges of protecting data in use, maybe looking towards things like homomorphic encryption someday.
And we hit the key controls. DLP needing to be a full program, not just tech. CISSP for cloud visibility using proxies or APIs. And the critical need for proper media-specific destruction degaussing only works on magnetic to handle data remnants.
So for you, the listener, really understanding this domain means shifting your thinking. You move from just protecting devices, protecting infrastructure,
To strategically protecting value. Prioritizing your security efforts based on the classification, the criticality of the information itself, not just how much the server cost.
makes perfect sense.
And that brings us to maybe a final provocative thought to leave people with. We've talked about complexity, continuous change. Asset security demands constant improvement.
Right.
Now, for the highest levels of assurance on really critical systems, some organizations pursue rigorous, formal security evaluations, like Common Criteria, which uses those evaluation assurance levels, or EALs.
EALs, right, like EAL4, EAL5. Higher numbers mean more rigorous testing, more assurance.
Exactly. But getting that certification, especially at higher levels like EAL4, which might be needed for systems handling really sensitive stuff, well, it's expensive and time-consuming.
Expensive.
Sources like the U.S. Government Accountability Office have pointed out it can cost vendors well over $1 million, sometimes take a year or more, just for the documentation and testing for something like EAL4.
Wow. A huge investment for a point-in-time certification.
And there's the rub. Given that the value of information changes constantly, threats evolve literally every week. How often should an organization realistically pursue and pay for that incredibly high cost and effort of an EAL3 or EAL4 certification for its critical systems?
Does that high one-time assurance snapshot really outweigh the value of continuous, maybe lower level, but real-time risk monitoring and agile response?
That's the critical question, isn't it? How do you balance the cost and delay of deep assurance certification against the dynamic reality of risk and data value? That continuous cost-benefit analysis. That's the ultimate tightrope for today's security leaders.